another Midair livecast. My name is Ian Tournay, aka Crash 7800, and we are here today to talk about sound and music design in midair. I am joined today by Owen and Benji, our music and sound directors, respectively. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Hey there, man.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. As everyone who's watching the stream is probably aware, Midair recently crossed the line getting greenlit on Steam. We're all very excited, and now we're excited to talk a little bit more about what goes into making the game. Of course, you've seen the graphics, you've seen some of the gameplay, you're probably eagerly awaiting the distinct play style of an FPS-Z, but today we're talking a little bit more about what goes into the style and design of a game. Music and sound. So I thought we would just start a little bit. Owen, could you introduce yourselves to us and just tell us a little about who you are and what you do on the game?
Yeah, of course. So I am, as you can tell, from London, England. I'm a composer. I write music for a variety of things. I've done music for TV adverts. I've written music for a variety of commercial projects. I write classical concert music, but video gaming is something I've done all my life, and I have always wanted the opportunity to write for video games, and I began doing stuff for apps like some little app mobile phone games and stuff. So cell phone, you guys say cell phone, don't you? Not mobile phone. So yeah, I've done music for a couple of those and a variety of little things, but I was really keen to get onto a project like Midair, and I found a way to open up a dialogue with Chris, and that was back in April last year, and yeah, it's gone from there really, and it's been fantastic.
That does sound fantastic. Benji, what about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from.
All right. Well, I am in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm a sound designer for interactive media, games, television, web. I've done some dialogue work for film. Huge fan of audio for gaming, all around. You might know some of my work from Tribes Ascend. Did the sound and implementation for that, as well as various other high-res games. And same as Owen, a few mobile games on the side, things like that.
Awesome. Really cool. So let's just kind of dive right in. Benji, I think we'll start with you. Talk to us a little bit about, how you came onto the project, and maybe just a couple of the things you started working on right off the bat to just kind of tell people, what is sound design, what is your role, and at a really high level, just kind of how you approach what you do day to day.
Yeah, so I originally saw a YouTube video for this game called Midair. It was right after PAX, some guy playing it, and I was like, wow, this looks awesome. I love the fast-paced jetpack shooters, huge FPS fan, so I reached out to the guys and told them I'd love to be a part of it and help them out with it. So that's how I came on board. As far as the day-to-day work for the sounds, that is pretty much at times a trial and error thing. I'll record a small fraps of an animation, something in game, and I will throw that into Pro Tools, start, throwing out some temp layers on the timeline, throwing memory locations, getting my big movements marked out and laid out and everything like that. And from that point on, just start designing sounds, throwing sounds in there, trying different things out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'll be on revision 40 and it still doesn't work, but by revision 45, hopefully something nice came out of it.
Awesome. So when I'm playing Midair and I hear a rocket explode, or I hear footsteps, or I hear the wind in the trees, is that all you?
Yes. So the way that works, and hopefully I'll be doing another stream in the near future showing some level design implementation for audio. The way that works is each audio has its own attenuation set up, which is pretty much like a 3D bubble, and that's where the sound plays. The further you are in that bubble towards the edge, the quieter it gets, and depending on your location is where that sound's going to play: left, right, center, rear speakers, things like that. So everything is attenuated and spatialized.
Awesome. That's super cool. Owen, so similar story for you. Talk to us about how you came across Midair and kind of what your day-to-day contribution to the game is.
So my way in was kind of unusual. I played a bit of Tribes, but I can hardly say I'm like a pro or anything like that. But my housemate was, and he was hugely into Tribes, and he played competitively, and he knows I'm a composer, and I was looking over his shoulder, and he told me about this new Tribes game or Tribes-like game that was in development, and it was really early days then. So I just shot Chris an email. I wondered if they had anyone composing, and at that point, there was another guy, Cruncher, who also does it, and I joined the project. Chris said, "Yeah." Cruncher checked out my stuff, and because of my classical training, I was able to bring a slightly different. I think I've got a slightly different angle to it because I'm not coming from the knowledge of any previous Tribe soundtracks. I'm coming from the experience I have in other parts of the industry, like short films and stuff like that. So I kind of approached the game initially as a composer with an interest in games rather than a guy who had done a lot of games music already. So and I think that's quite an interesting part at the beginning, just kind of calibrating my experience with the way it worked within the team, working with all you guys. So I got in touch. Chris welcomed me on board. I made friends with everyone, and then I started exploring all the going through all the art and kind of working out where the heart of the game was. And it went from there really, and it's been
Awesome.
brilliant. So I write stuff. I'm always working on something, a lot of which has been played in the background of these Twitch things already.
Awesome. So when we were waiting for the stream to start, or if I'm watching the trailer that's on the Steam page or on the YouTube, and I hear that great music, that's you.
Absolutely, yeah. That's all me so far, yeah.
Awesome. So talk to us a little bit, and I guess both of you can kind of chime in here. I mean, I think everyone has kind of dreamed about working on video games. They think about what they do on a game. What attracted you to working on games, and how did you kind of start to get into the industry?
Benji, do you want to start on that one, man?
Yeah, sure. I've always been a gamer for as long as I can remember. I think the first game I played was a Microsoft Flight Sim on floppy disk, and then from there on out, it was I was a gamer. So it's a cool thing being able to work on games. I mean, that's something you love to do every day, and then finally you get to be a part of the development and creative process of everything like that. Back when I was a little kid, I knew nothing about how a game was made or even how audio was put into a game. I never thought about it, and when I started working in the industry, I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is a ton of work, but the reward is amazing and the payoff is great.
Awesome. Owen, similar story for you?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to all the games I played as a kid, growing up on the SNES, mainly I did a lot of SNES gaming and then onto the PS1. Those kind of games, the soundtracks, because you sort of sat there playing a game for hours every day, the music and the soundtrack of that game embeds itself, on your mind in a way different to your favorite film that you might have watched 10 times. The nature of the experience of music in video games is so much. I think it becomes part of you in a completely different way. Because when you think back to a game that you might have played, like Street Fighter or something when you were a kid, and then you hear the Ken theme come on, it just really evokes that memory so strongly. And so for me, I've always considered music for video games such a huge part of my memory of the game, and when you're actually playing them, you enjoy it, and it's a big part of the gameplay experience as well. But for me, it's kind of almost thinking back and thinking how important those soundtracks of my favorite games were, and how incredible it would be to actually write one of my own.
Sure.
With Midair.
And so talking about, oh, go ahead, Benji.
Oh no, I was just gonna add to what Owen was saying about the, I hate the word, but nostalgia of sounds and things like that you hear in the past. A big one for me was I used to play EverQuest, and always hearing those spell sounds, as simple as they were, it was just such an iconic sound. And
Mm.
that's always been the goal, to create that one iconic sound, or to create something that is just loved and played a million times that you still don't get tired of hearing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually this would be a good time to bring up a question that we received in the Reddit thread leading up to the stream, from our friend who I see in the chat, by the way. Thanks for showing up. I'm going to butcher your name here. I think it's Pump. I'm going to say it with a little gusto. Pompiche. Pompiche wants to know, he's looking at the design style of the game, the art style of the game, bright colors, kind of a little bit more hand-drawn, animated looking. I guess, Benji, kind of when you sit down to design sound, you talked about how a sound effect can be so iconic and can kind of, bring you into a game, and really make you feel like, really evoke those memories. How do you approach a game and kind of start to, in your mind, map out what that game's going to sound like?
I guess in a way it starts with a lot of R&D in a way. This game, as far as sound goes, was inspired a lot by, as so far at least, was inspired a lot by Disney movies, Pixar movies, cartoony things like that. Real crisp, clean sounds and beeps that maybe talk to you or almost sound like language, things like that. So it's kind of a fine balance between that really cool, sci-fi, hard sound, big explosions, big weapons fire, but at the same time, you've got your cutesy little deployables or little animations, things like that just kind of talk to you and have their own little personality.
Gotcha. And so when and you kind of touch on this a little bit, but when you say, sci-fi, when you say, things like organic or cute, so in your mind as a sound designer, are these things that you're in your mind, you're like, oh, it reminds me of this sound, or do you kind of hear like a sound in your head and you just try to get to that point, or like when you sit down in the morning, you're like, okay, time to make Midair sound the way Midair sounds. Where do you kind of even start? Like, what toolbox do you open, or what do you reference?
Um, I'd just say the movies, honestly. When I
Mm,
first open up a new animation, the first thing I'll do is throw down a bunch of memory locations, which is tagging specific parts on the timeline. And that's just showing me where the animation is doing key movements, things like that. So maybe at one of those key movements, I'll have that cutesy little, beep language, like a Wally type language or something like that along those lines. And then, maybe a background sound underneath that for the more subtle part of the animation and things like that. But at the end of the day, yeah, you can go into the animation with the idea of, oh, I know exactly what this is going to sound like, but 10 minutes in, it's probably going to be
mm,
totally different and probably better as well. So
gotcha.
it's just a trial and error thing most of the time.
Very cool. Oh, and similar question for you. I mean, I think, we like to think that Midair has a very distinctive look. It doesn't look like a lot of the other first-person shooters that are on the market. When you approach this game musically, I know you and I had talked a little bit when we are kind of coming up with some tracks to put behind the trailer. But talk to me a little bit about how, art and design and aesthetic plays into your initial concepts for writing a score.
Yeah, of course. Well, the first chat I had with Chris, and I can't remember who else, but it was a big group chat shortly after I joined, and the thing I really wanted to kind of establish as quickly as I could was where the kind of as much as I could about the lore of the game and the basic sort of core of it. And so I thought if I can understand that, then I can sort of bring that to the music. And the kind of most important part of it was this kind of magical force and everything. And I thought, okay, this is a really good place to start with the music, because it means that I can kind of just make sure that, because you look for kind of threads that you can keep consistent. So whether you're doing the music for the menu screen, or whether you're doing the music for a certain map or other kind of OST stuff, you look for kind of themes that you can keep consistent between all of those tracks. So I wanted to try and work out where the core of that was. And so you can do that with things like instruments. You can pick certain instrumental sounds that you like, that you can try to mix into as many of the different tracks as you can. Little melodic ideas or hooks that you could try to fit into several of the tracks. But yeah, it was really just establishing what I understood to be the kind of, I don't know, the soul of the game. And then since, you know, I'm the composer, I was, you know, one of the awesome things, especially as it's an independent project, is being given the space and the freedom to do your own thing, and then give it, and, you know, write the track, finish it, send it to the rest of the team, and then everyone can kind of feedback. And so the process was really organic of, you know, I write a track, I give it in, I see what people think, and it kind of evolves a little bit. But yeah, as far as approaching a new track's concerned, I'll begin with thinking what the subject is, be that menu or, as I said, then I'll think, okay, what instruments do I think are suitable for this? And then I'll chat with people about it and see if they agree. And then I'll set about writing the start of the track. And then once I've got a version that I think's okay, I'll share it with everyone, get the feedback from the group, go back to it, maybe add some more, tweak it a bit. And that seems to, it's worked so far in getting a track that people are broadly happy with, because it's just about the community feel of it. It's really important. And sharing the music with all the guys on the Twitch streams, and getting people's feedback's just awesome, because we've kind of had it rolling in the background every week. So just getting any feedback about the music at all is really useful for me, because while I want to do my own take on it, what, you know, the community and the rest of the team and what everyone thinks about it is really important as well.
Gotcha. So I think we actually have one of the tracks that is going to be featured in the game that maybe we've even heard a little bit about, and I think maybe we can kind of listen to that, and as we're listening to that, you can talk a little bit about what went into making this track, and just kind of where you're coming from as it was being made. You know, anything that kind of comes to mind as you hear it.
Okay, well, since there's the bit of delay, so when I'm saying something, it might not sync up directly with the
that's all right.
corresponding part of the track. Yeah, so why don't you pop on Sana first, which I wrote for the ice or snow map, which I think people have already seen on the Twitch. I think we did a stream on this map already, so everyone already knows what that looks like.
Cool. So I'm hearing some kind of, you know, like really kind of open, airy themes, some kind of you know, electronic chiming sounds. How did you kind of, just to begin with, like, how do you decide on instrumentation for something like this?
Well, on this one, I was kind of thinking that I wanted sort of light, high noises. I put the whole thing in what you call an irregular time signature, which is where you have unequal music's divided into bars, and a bar is just a simple musical block into which everything fits. So when you hear your normal pop songs or rock songs, they'll probably be in 4 or maybe 3. And my take on snow and ice was something uncertain and unstable. So I put the thing in a irregular time signature. So I thought that, because for me that was my take on the snow and the awkwardness of ice and the crunch and the pressure.
Sure.
So I wanted to make it have that in it. So I began at its very core by saying, I'm going to make this a bit weird, but in a way that you can't necessarily pinpoint. So I put it in 5 beats per bar, and I wanted to make it a bit quirky. And this is the most recent one I've finished, and I don't and people had been liking the stuff I'd done already, so I thought, okay, I'm gonna push the boat out with this one and
Gotcha.
make it a little bit more unusual and see what people think.
Yeah.
And so these high sounds and these twinkly bits were kind of quite a literal take on, you know, little glistening icicles or whatever. And then that's kind of counter-weighted by this very low, big drum stuff. Then it kind of develops into a much more fast, upbeat thing with drums, stuff like that, and that was much more a reference to the gameplay and actually, you know, playing it, because a lot of this OST stuff that I've been doing, when it comes to writing the actual in-game music, I'll draw from these OST tracks to help to write the music that's then actually going to be playing while you play the game.
Gotcha.
So this is kind of a broad outline of things that you might get in the map, mixed in with some of what my take on an icy, snowy scene to be.
Very cool. Well, talk to me about, so you know, and I'm looking at the Twitch chat, and our good friend again, Pompiche, is in, and he's asking, you know, he says, oh, I totally get it. As soon as I hear this, I get that kind of chill feeling. I get that kind of, you know, I get that clear strokes. I feel snow, I feel ice. What is it about that? Is it the instrumentation? Is it tempo? Is it, what kind of makes a track, you know, I think like we can kind of feel it as people, as just people listening to music, but like, what is it about any kind of track that makes it feel a certain way in terms of an environment?
So, in its most literal way, when I think of snow, as we all do, you think very bright, you think very crisp, clean, and you think of sharpness and crispness and all this. So that kind of manifests itself to me in high frequency, twinkling, reflective sounds. And I'm sure Benji considers all these things in much greater depth than me when he's doing his sound design things. But with musically, you think of kind of high-pitched stuff, little twinkly bits and pieces. So I had parts of those running throughout this track at one point or another. So I thought, okay, well, I've got to have lots of little high sounds, but I also want to get in the sort of the epicness and the hugeness of this snowy terrain, and that's where I counterbalance the very high noises with the much lower, deeper drum sounds, and then the rest is all of what sort of fits in between.
Very cool. So Benji, so now you've got, you know, you've got the game, you see how it moves, you see what the pace of action is like, you've got Owen's beautiful music here, you know, so how much of what Owen does kind of informs where you're coming from when you're kind of, you know, creating your sound palette?
Well, we go back and forth quite frequently, actually, bouncing ideas off each other, making sure both sound and music mix together. When I first came on board, we had a talk about, you know, how we want the sound and music to play together, things like that, because I'm sure, as everybody's aware, 99% of the FPS games, or if any game you join, first thing you probably do is turn music off so you can hear the game. So one of the things we had talked about was that, and how we could avoid the user turning that music off. So we came to the understanding that the music and sound needs to not only mix well together, but also play well together, and they both, you know, work together and help each other in certain aspects. Where there's no sound, maybe the music picks up. Where, you know, where there's a lot of music, the sound might cool down depending on what you're doing or the situation you're in. So there was a lot of thought put into that, on how to make the music and sound mix happily ever after together.
And Benji, actually, just to interject, one thing that I had not done before was writing music that is designed to be looped depending on the situation you're in, which is something completely specific to gaming music. So when you were, and we're still working on this right now, getting me to do loops for certain, so like if you've just grabbed the flag, a loop plays, this kind of thing. That's something I've not done at all, and this is one of the key points where your sound designing and the actual point at which audio files are going into the Unreal Engine and being put into the game. That's a point at which you and I are need to be completely aligned, and it's that point at which the music is actually becoming part of the gameplay but also part of the sound, and so the whole thing becomes one sort of organic unit at that point. And that's something you've told me all about and that we're working on right now, which is really cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think when I think of some of my favorite games, especially from kind of the NES, SNES periods, you have these great sound cues. Super Mario Brothers. Kind of when your superstar power is going to run out because of the sound. Kind of when you're in a more powerful or more vulnerable position based upon music. And so I guess the question is, you guys kind of already talked about it a little bit, and that you guys are feeding off of each other and playing off each other, which is amazing, because that's really only going to make things better and more immersive for people. I guess the other question too is, so tonally, Benji, we've got this kind of beautiful art style. It's a little more animated, a little more hand drawn. We've got Owen's beautiful track. It's very ethereal and intriguing. So when you come to the board and you're like, okay, I'm gonna make a rocket launcher exploding noise, or I'm gonna make feet walking on the grass. Talk to me about what if you were, for example, remaking Doom or something. Talk to me about how you approach Midair differently based upon the art style and what you're looking at.
The art style plays a huge role. You obviously can't take super dark, gory type sounds or horror type sounds and throw them into a cute game like this, right? It won't fit. The sounds might line up to the animations, but you'll still have that disconnect between sound and animation. So kind of like what Owen was saying with his snow music, the twinkling and the more high frequency type sounds like that can kind of come into play with. I almost approach it as depending on the color as well. So not only the animation, but if something's got a blue color to it, I might do a softer type sound as opposed to maybe black or red, or a darker color might be a heavier type sound with lower frequencies, things like that. And all those things come into play and get factored into. At the end of the day, the goal is to make the sound match with everything to where at the point you don't even notice the sound. It's just a part of the experience.
Very cool. So then talk to me about when you are making that sound, what kind of levers can you kind of move around? I mean, how much of the sound you're making is, completely digital or sampled, or are you doing Foley work? Like what does your tool bench look like?
It's about half and half depending on what it is. Obviously, like you said, a rocket launcher. I unfortunately don't have a rocket launcher to take in my backyard and record.
We can find the budget for that. We can do that, right?
I would do it, but certain things like that, you have to bite the bullet and get a bed sound in and build off of that. As far as other sounds that are a little bit more maybe organic or just completely different to where you have to design a sound, then you go out, record your Foley or design your layers, and you just process it and tweak it until you're happy with what you have, and then submit to Peanut Gallery and get your feedback and go from there.
Awesome. So if I'm your neighbor and I look out my window, I mean, am I going to see you, tromping around in the snow or throwing trash can lids around, holding a microphone at it, or what does your creative space kind of look like?
Yeah, there's been a couple of times where I'm sure my neighbors were like, "What is this guy doing?" I had one neighbor. He was cutting down this big tree that fell over in a storm, and he had the chainsaws out and everything. And I ran out the door, half dressed, half not. Ran out the door. I was like, "Hey, man, can you just stop cutting this tree down for 2 minutes? Let me get my microphone." And he was like, "Are you for real?" I was like, "Yes, I'll be right back." So I came back. I ran back in the house, came back out, and grabbed the microphone and started recording that.
That's
So
awesome.
it's a mix though. Half Foley, half design, half some stuff you can do in the box is what it's called as well, right off the computer, where I just audio suite a bunch of sine waves or simple sounds like that to completely get a different result than the original sound.
Very cool. Owen, I mean, I guess so. Maybe you're not following your neighbors around while they're chopping down trees, but
Yeah.
if I were your neighbor, am I hearing sound coming through the wall? Am I hearing music all nights of the day? I mean, I see you've got your Beethoven bust going on there, so you're obviously a very dedicated
Yeah.
musician.
He's a good lad, actually.
It is. Yeah, I mean, what does your workspace look like? What kind of tools are you using on a day-to-day basis?
So mine is mainly made up of, obviously I have a really large stack of crumpets and a expensive China tea set, which I'm using all the time. I've got a hard line to the Queen, so I can speak with her if I need. No, when I'm not eating crumpets or drinking tea, the neighbours will just hear a shitload of music. It's just constantly playing. Like, you've got to have a. I use my monitor speakers rather than headphones most of the time, and so I've not had any complaints because I switched to headphones after 11 o'clock, but generally it's just loops of music. So they will get so bored of it. They'll be like, oh shit, that's still going on, but it's not after 11, so legally I can't complain. Yeah, no, so it's just loops of music going over and over again, and my flatmate, who is a huge Tribes fan and who will, I'm sure, make a big donation when Kickstarter gets going. Although he doesn't see what I'm doing, he gets to hear it through his walls. So when the game does come out, he's going to know the whole soundtrack anyway.
Nice, perfect. Well, that's awesome. I mean, and I guess both of you guys have already kind of talked about referencing other games, referencing your love of games. Anytime I meet anyone who makes games, anytime I get a chance to, I just love to talk to anyone, even if it's on an airplane. What games, and I guess we'll start with Owen, what kind of soundtracks really influenced you and made you kind of come to the end? I mean, obviously, you're a classically trained guy. You have a wealth of options on how to, pursue music and be a musician. What attracted you to games, and what were some of the games that really inspired you?
So, more modern games, actually, I'm usually a bit less interested in, just because when you have the huge games, they've all got a massive budget, so they're going to be recording some brilliant orchestra in a glossy studio somewhere, and those soundtracks are incredible, but because there's so many awesome ones, I don't know, they often I don't memorize them in the same way that I do the classics. So when I say classic, it's really going back to when I started gaming, in the 90s, early 90s with my SNES. So I was the game track. I mean, soundtracks, I reckon the most significant one for me is probably Donkey Kong Country. And that, I think it's Dennis Wise who wrote a lot of the music for that. So I think there was something so clearly digitally simple about the fact that they had to do it all in however many bits they had. I don't know, 8-bit or 16-bit. I think it was 16-bit, wasn't it? Yeah.
16.
So they were like really limited by that, which meant that they had to address the most simple key components, which were basically melody and rhythm, and these weird little noises that now you hear and you think, oh, that sounds kind of crap, but at the time that was state of the art. So you heard all that stuff and you just get these big melodies stuck in your head and you remember them. And so when I got older and I was in bands and stuff and I was doing songwriting, obviously when you're writing songs, it's all about melody, and so I've taken that with me. So with our Midair tracks, I always tried to get tunes in there one way or the other. So for me, the kind of big influences were just going way back to the oldest games. You've got Donkey Kong, Killer Instinct, the first one was wicked. The stuff that was in that game, like, you think Glacius, you think Saberwolf, you hear these really awesome tunes. And I know the new Killer Instinct, what's the dude's name with the long hair? Peter, I can't remember, but he's wicked. His take on it is really glossy and lovely, and it sounds great. But even now, I find it less memorable than just Glacius tune, da, 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 which is wicked. So the older games, Killer Instinct, Donkey Kong, Street Fighter, Zelda, on SNES, of course.
Sure.
Just loads of old games. Medieval, that was really good.
Well, it sounds like a lot of games with these, really strong character motifs, little melodies, little themes that are evocative of a character or a place or an emotion. And when you approach a game like Midair, which isn't necessarily as narrative driven, it's huge focus on multiplayer action. How do you start to find characters within that? Is it about maps? Is it about weapons? Is it about how do you start to identify the themes that you want to pick out?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because you'd think, okay, music goes with the story, but when you've got a game which is so artistically unique in its way, I mean, I'm sure that everyone can find things that it looks like, but to me, it is so unique and cool looking. You take that as your inspiration, and when you look at the maps and you look at the characters, you immediately get a feel for the mood of it. So when I first joined, I thought, okay, are they going to want some like hardcore sort of sci-fi stuff? Going back to the earliest Tribes 1 and 2 and stuff, you've got like distorted guitars, you've got these really driven, hardcore electronic sounds. And so I thought, well, are they looking to remake this? Are they looking to reference that so that the old fans hear, oh yeah, that's a bit like that, or what? And my take on it was, well, I see this map, and I see this, the one that we've got in the trailer, and it's beautiful and it's rich and colourful. And I thought, okay, well, to me, that evokes, these instruments, this rich sound. And so the fact that there was, at least when I started, it wasn't like, okay, here's the storyline, and at the end the main dude dies, so it's going to be sad then. It was just much more, look at the richness of this map, look at the art style, and try to find something equally rich in the music, which I then did, and as I said earlier, bounce it back off everyone and see what they think.
That's great. It's absolutely great. And I guess Benji, going back just a little bit, you talked a little bit about some of the games that stick out in your memory, but I guess, what are some other games that you really kind of you look to emulate, or what are games that you really really love? Like, what are some kind of games that you just really that stand out in your memory as having great sound design that kind of inspire you on a day-to-day basis?
It's probably gonna be like Owen. I have a huge list, I guess, of games that have inspired me. To narrow it down, though, I pretty much keep it to two genres of games that I play. It's MMOs, and then you got your shooters. So I guess that's good, because I've got one side's my fantasy spells and elves, and then the other side is my guns and dudes and explosions. So that's, and Midair falls right in the middle of that. So that's good. But as far as games go, I would say Rift, Diablo 3, and recently I've been playing Star Citizen, which that game has some amazing sound in it. It's just, everything is so clear, there's so much detail, and it's just beautiful. And for the alpha, the sound is polished. But also it's a lot of films that inspire the style of work that I'll do, or the type of things I'll create. There was a while, for a good year, even 2 years, where I was watching a lot of movies or even playing a lot of games with no sound, just for the, just to watch it so I could see it and be like, I see an explosion, what would this cool explosion look like where it was in space? So things like that. And then obviously I'll go back, watch the movie with sound, and compare my thoughts to the original, and
that's awesome.
Go from there.
So do you think, that's a really, I think, most of us play games, watch movies, we just kind of, we kind of just enjoy it, right? It just kind of washes over us. I think it's a testament to, what you do, how you got where you are, that you analyze media and entertainment so critically. So talk to me about, what is it? So I think that's amazing that you're able to kind of look back. How much of that, like, how are you kind of, what's your percentage mix on, I'm just enjoying something, I'm just watching it, versus critically analyzing it? And I guess the bigger question is, obviously watching movies and games, that's where you're getting your ideas for sound design. But like, where maybe are some other places in entertainment or just day-to-day life that you draw ideas and inspiration from?
Uh, the backyard is closest to the backyard. I was working on the Wilder Zone map when I first came on board. That was one of the first things I started on, getting environments in that. And I was trying to find. I had a small leaf rustling sound over trees. So where you pass by trees, you hear the wind through the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to find a nice attenuation for that, right? A nice size for where that sound's going to play in the game. Not too big, not too small. Based on, obviously because it's a fast-paced game, you're going to be flying by trees pretty fast. And I walked outside, and sure enough, the wind was going through the trees. And I sat there and looked at the tree. I was like, well, it's probably a couple hundred feet away, and I still hear it. So simple things like that. And I went back inside and raised the attenuation a little bit. So it's everyday life. Walk into the mall, you hear a cool sound, and go back home and you're like, I'm going to recreate that sound.
That's awesome. And so, and we've kind of talked about it a lot now, but when you're, so you see, oh, okay, that's, oh, I can hear it from this distance. How do you start to mix and match, reality with fantasy? So you say, okay, in the real world, if I'm a couple hundred feet away, I can still hear that tree. But how do you start to, and you talked about Star Citizen, which I think does this amazing job of saying, here is a completely alien way of life. Here is, a science fiction perspective on space travel, but it's able to project it so realistically and with such a kind of inner consistency that you believe that, oh, of course, this is the way space travel is, even though we have no way of knowing what space travel is like. And so how do you, when you're working with a fantasy world, how do you start to mix the way that things really are in the real world with what you want to project, that you have to kind of create out of nothing?
It depends. Sometimes you can get away with the quote Hollywood type sounds, which are the really big over the top explosion sounds that'll shake your seat. Other times you can't get away with that. I've seen some games that go that entire Hollywood route, and yeah, at times it can be cool, right? The cinematics might be really badass or something like that, but it might not always fit to have the biggest sound in the world always playing. So at the end of the day, I've always felt that if you hear the sound but you don't notice it, and you're playing the game, and you, at the end of the day, as a game as a whole, you feel immersed and you feel like you're really going up and down these hills, shooting people, mid-airing people, and things like that, then the mission's been accomplished, right? Kind of like the no feedback is good feedback. If nobody really notices anything, then on the audio side of thing, you've done your job because your sounds fit the environment and make the environment believable. So that's the big trick, just to make things fit, not always have your big Hollywood explosions, but at the same time, if it's necessary, do put those in certain spots.
Awesome.
It's interesting actually, mentioned that you say that, because I think that to some extent with the in-game music, I think that's what we're also going to hopefully get, where you've got the music, the flag or whatever, and you are pumped up by the sound of the music rather than having your attention necessarily drawn completely to it. There's this thing that they that I learned about years ago when I was at uni called semiotics in music. And I think semiotics means something a bit different when it comes to philosophy, but with music it's about a sound that you hear that makes you think of something kind of subconsciously. So like if you heard a trumpet call, or something, you'd think military, you'd think something patriotic or something like that. So you can begin with that as your basic concept, but then you can kind of extrapolate and take more from that and think, okay, well, so in the case of Wilder Zone, this map has these kind of cherry blossomy trees that look beautiful and make me think slightly of maybe some art style I've seen in East Asia. Okay, so I make a little shout out to that in the music as you're going through that map, and it subconsciously fills out what you're seeing with the sound. And while you hope that people are going to enjoy it, you also hope that they're not completely distracted by it, and it's just fitting in with the complete kind of sensation of the map as you're going around it.
Awesome.
Yeah, Yeah, and I just saw a question, or not a question, but a comment in the stream from Fictious, the Wolves of Arx Novena, the Space Wolves never forget.
Well, and I think that's a really cool point. It's like, how do you decide? To Owen's point, you say, oh, okay, in your mind, you see this, you think of that, you hear a complimenting sound or complimenting music, and that all kind of gels, and you feel it feels whole, right? It feels right. How do you decide when to break that? When to make, and like, talk to me about like what that decision is like. Obviously you're not breaking the rules 100% of the time, or it's just chaos, but every once in a while, I think part of something that's really interesting to do creatively is say, look, at this is the expectation, I'm going to break that to help kind of distinguish my creation. How do either of you guys kind of like, talk to me about a time that you've done that, or a way that you're doing that in Midair, and what you think that kind of accomplishes?
I'll start, Benji. So I think with you've got different opportunities to do that depending on the thing that you're working on, at least for me. So with a map gameplay, I don't want to do something so weird with a music loop that people are going to be playing it, hearing that one loop maybe 50 times during a game and think, oh shit, why did he do that then? And it just becomes this thing that everyone hears. But when it comes to, say, the OST stuff, I want to deliberately try and make the music really unique, unusual. It's an independent game, and this is a really good opportunity to do something different, to try and do an iconic score rather than trying to pastiche scores that people have heard in other games that they like, oh yeah, we love this game, so can you try and imitate that composer's style? So when it comes to the OST stuff, I'm trying to do that all the time. I'm always trying to make something that's not too generic, and I'm always trying to do something a little bit unusual. But when it comes to the in-game music, due to the fact that it's about playing the game, it's about going around really fast shooting each other, that at that point I do want to try and make the music much more just a support of what you're seeing on the screen, rather than make a statement and go, okay, even now I'm going to be weird as a composer, and I'm going to make this weird instrument come in, and you're all going to be confused and miss your shot.
Benji, is there anything like that for you? Is maybe some of the ways that you're blazing a new trail, breaking the mold a little bit with the work that you're doing on Midair?
There's actually one. It's the one of the deployable sensors. I was talking with a buddy on the phone the other day, and we were talking about different sounds in games where if you see something mechanical move, 99% of the time you're going to hear some servo behind it, right? And that's pretty much the industry standard all the way from games to film to television.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about how you could do something different to convey the movement of this mechanical arm or something like that, deploying or unfolding without using any servo. So I spent a couple nights on that, messing around, trying to come up with a sound that had absolutely no servo mechanics or anything like that in it. And I ended up coming up with a cool sound which kind of falls under the lines of inspiration that I mentioned before, which was, Pixar, Disney, things like that, where it was, more beeps and specific frequencies that kind of convey an alien or robotic language, as opposed to you hear the arm moving and that's that. You almost hear the thing come alive instead.
That's awesome. Well, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned that exact sound. Before we got started, Owen and I were talking about some of the games that we were talking that really inspired us, and XCOM came up. Anyone who has talked to me for 5 minutes, you could be like, "Hey, how's the weather?" Be like, "Oh, it's really sunny." Have I talked to you about the original XCOM and how much I just cannot get enough XCOM? Big XCOM nut. And so that was a game that had really great sound design, really great music, really great sound effects. But it's kind of funny. I don't know if they used kind of like a toolkit, or if their sound effects were so iconic. But sometimes when I'm watching movies, people are going upstairs or walking on metal, or like you say, a door opens, or like I was watching The Babadook the other day. There's this monster scream, and I instantly recognized it as a sound effect that had been used before, namely in XCOM. And I think what's kind of interesting is to talk to people in sound design. Benji, like what are the sound effects that when you hear them, kind of instantly you go, oh, I know that sound effect. I've heard that sound effect before somewhere else.
Oh man, there's a couple, none that really stand out though, honestly. Yeah, some sounds might sound similar. You know, going back to the servo thing, that was the main reason why I wanted to try something different, because the servos pretty much become the standard, and the Transformers type sound has pretty much become the standard for anything mechanical that moves or unfolds or anything like that. So I guess that could be an example of something I've heard a whole bunch of the Transformer type sounds, because everybody and their mother is doing that now. So I wanted to do something different, different than the Transformer sound, you know, kind of break the mold a little bit and try something new. And like Owen said, because this is indie, we have a little bit more creative freedom and we have a little bit more choice in the matter, as opposed to a big corporate studio where you do what the boss tells you to do. So
awesome.
that's also good, you know, having that freedom to experiment and try different things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but most of the time they work.
Benji,
Yeah.
I don't know if you played Command and Conquer Red Alert, but there was a flamethrower when you were burnt and someone died death by fire in that. There was a particular scream that I'm sure I have heard in loads of other games since.
Oh, the iconic, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. The
Someone
iconic
on
scream.
fire.
Is it
Yeah.
full on Wilhelm scream, or is it a slightly different one?
God knows it. It's just someone horribly on fire, which
Yeah.
I've heard so many times.
Yeah, it's probably that. I think I know what you're talking about. That's in just about every movie or game, pretty much. That's one of those iconic sounds that just got used for everything. Never really fits on anything though. That's the funny thing. But it's so memorable and iconic that it doesn't matter where you put it. You could have a heart bouncing in the middle of a flower patch and play that sound, and everybody would be like, "Yeah, that's awesome."
Oh, is there going to be a midair flamethrower, I wonder?
Now we have to have one just so we can have the scream in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think the same can be said of music though too. There are certain kind of tropes, there are certain kind of conventions that you hear in gaming. I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone lately, like any decent addict would, and I recognize some themes from some classical music that was kind of blended in the soundtrack. And I actually messaged the composer, a gentleman named Peter McConnell on Twitter, and I said, hey, I noticed this kind of this melody in your music, and he said, yep, that's absolutely where I got it from. And you know, he reminded me, you know, great musicians quote from other great musicians all the time. And I was just wondering, for loyal Midair fans, people who are talking, you know, Owen, are there any allusions or are there any kind of quotes that sharp-eared music fans may notice in the Midair soundtrack?
Well, not so far, but what you just said actually about the there's this really famous quotation that we were told when we were learning composition, and the lecturer said to us, good composers imitate, great composers copy, or the other way around. It's something really stupid like that, and you realize how much kind of intertextual reference there is between composers subconsciously, or well, often just really overtly, but like you like the style of one person, so you kind of you imitate that. But in terms of really direct things that you might have heard in other games, it's more likely to be instrumental combinations. I'll do my best not to actually, you know, I'm not going to copy someone's tune or some exact thing, but like there are certain things that go together particularly well in a time-honored fashion. So desert map music, I did an original soundtrack for a deserty theme, and so you use kind of instruments from the Middle East or India or countries where you would really like what I was saying earlier about a sound that you're going to very directly link to it. So while I'm not kind of copying any tunes or anything like that you might have heard, I have used in some of the tracks, sort of well-known instrumental combinations that you know are going to create the general effect you want. You know, you hear these kind of Middle Eastern-y instrumental sounds, and everyone will naturally associate that with the desert. And if you take that as your starting point, and then you do your own thing within that, you've kind of, everyone gets it, they get where you're at with the track, and then they can enjoy what you've chosen to do with those instruments and how unique you're going to be with them. But then there are some tracks where it's just like, okay, I'm just going to really go mental with this and try something weird, and if it makes sense, great. If not, I'll delete it and we'll do something different.
Awesome. That's very cool. And then I think, we'll kind of come around to our final set of questions here as we wind down, but I just wanted to, I think, Owen, you said something great, which is, working on an indie game is affording you, the opportunity to try something different, and do something a little differently. I guess just kind of talk to me about, what working on Midair is like, anything you'd like the fans to know, and just kind of what you're looking forward to moving forward working on the game.
Well, I'm sure that, all the guys and girls, I'm sure there are thousands of those too, following the game can see is that it's just it's full of people with such complete passion for what they're working on. It's people who just want to make the best possible game they can, that the community are going to love. And so when I came on board, I was just immediately aware of how much everyone cares about the details. It's like the opposite of what you would picture a huge company to be like. It's like, oh, well, these people are saying this, we should check that out. And, these guys are getting annoyed about that. Everyone cares about everything, when people are out there writing comments and stuff, whether it's on the music or the art, even if there's not been a reply, that's meant something to someone. And so for me, one of the things that I've loved so much about it has just been the fact that everyone cares about it. And so it means that I'm putting my heart into the music. I'm trying to do something a bit weird mixed with, well, hopefully not too weird, but unique. I really want to make a soundtrack which, for all the people that play this game, in 10 years time, they'll go, oh shit, I'm going to go and check out that soundtrack on YouTube. I'd like to make a soundtrack that people remember, that goes hand in hand with the style of the game, and is as much effort and passion and love has gone into as every other aspect of the game. And I just hope I can write something that lives up to those big words.
Well, I think everyone has been enjoying it hugely. I know definitely I have. Working with you has been a complete pleasure, and I've just got to say, by the way, Owen is very modest when we're working on things and we say, hey, Owen, we're kind of thinking this way, and, well, this is kind of the gist we're doing, and we send him off to work. It's like, okay, well, Owen will do this, and he'll come back, and then we'll work on it again, and then we'll go back and forth a few times, and we'll have it ready. Then Owen comes back, he's like, look, I nailed it. We're like, oh, you did, and you nailed it. So working with you has been an absolute pleasure. I have no doubt that the Midair soundtrack will be one of the most iconic elements of the game. Benji, similar question for you. What has been working with Archetype been like for you, and what do you kind of hope to be able to do, and you hope fans take away from your work on Midair?
It's been fun, actually. When I first came on board, being that it was an indie studio and a new IP, I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure how much structure there is going to be on as far as the development side and things like that. But I came on board, and this thing it's structured. The development team is well put together. Everybody's extremely talented. Everybody knows exactly what they need to do, how to do it, when to do it. Everybody's on the same page, so that's a blessing of its own, because if you've ever worked on a project where there's just one person not on the same page, it can be hell. So that's been awesome. What I want people to take away from it, I guess the same as any other creative person in this type of situation would want: somebody who remembers their work and finds, maybe even if it's just one sound or a couple sounds that they think are iconic, that just stick with them throughout the game's life or throughout their entire gaming career. Just that one sound where they come back 10-15 years later and they say, oh man, you guys remember that one sound in Midair? That was so cool. So that's my goal.
What I've heard of your stuff,
that
man,
iconic sound.
You're already doing that. Benji's done some of the most late, like 2 o'clock in the morning. I've maybe been a bit drunk. I have a chat with Benji. He shows me a sound he's working on. I see this massive project with like 20 or 30 tracks, all for a sound that lasts like 2 seconds. And the way he's got the quirkiness and the humor and the fingerprint, very unique sound. He's already nailing these things. Everyone's going to love him, man.
Oh, you're too kind. I'm me hugging you right now. I'm hugging you through the computer.
Yeah, well, you can feel the love. You can feel the love all around Archetype Studios. Well, I just want to say thank you again, Owen and Benji. Thank you for joining us for this live stream. For all of our loyal fans in the chat, including Pomplice, we hope to hear more from you soon. Please keep the questions coming. They drive us. They keep us awake late nights, working hard. We're going to have more in the future. We're going to hear more from Benji. We're going to have more coding. We may even be able to see a team member as a Midair tattoo. And of course, you've been asking, it may start to trickle out the lore behind Midair. We're going to have the Twitter handles for both Owen and Benji right here in the Twitch chat. Don't be shy. Reach out to those guys if you have more questions. You'd love to talk. I've had the pleasure of speaking with both of them. They're very nice guys. But other than that, I think I'm going to say thank you to Benji. Thank you, Benji.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to say thank you and happy birthday to Owen.
Fuck. Yeah. Yeah, I'm 33. You got to do it. Yeah. Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you to all the Midair fans who have been supporting us, who helped us get Greenlight on Steam, who have been watching the channel. Please tell your friends. We need more fans. We need more people to tune in. We need more people to love us. So thank you most of all for tuning in, and we will see you on the next Midair live stream. Now I just kind of go like this. Woo!